Welcome back to Storytime with Mr. Benggio. Sorry about yesterday's one, but hopefully today's one works. Okay, we're going to read chapter 14, Mr. Willy Wonka. Mr. Wonka was standing alone just inside the open gates of the factory, and what an extraordinary little man he was. He had a black top hat on his head. He wore a tailed coat made of a beautiful plum-colored velvet. His trousers were bottle green. His gloves were pearly grey. And in one hand he carried a fine, gold-topped walking cane. Covering his chin there was a small, neat, pointed black beard, a goatee, and his eyes were the most marvellously bright. They seemed to be sparkling and twinkling at you all the time. The whole face, in fact, was alight with fun and laughter. And oh, how clever he looked, how quick and sharp and full of life. He kept making jerky little movements with his head, cocking it this way and that, and taking everything in those bright twinkling eyes. He was like a squirrel in the quickness of his movements, like a quick, clever old squirrel from the park. Suddenly he did a funny little skipping dance in the snow. He spread his arms wide. He smiled at the 5 children who were clustered near the gates, and he called out, "Welcome, my little friends, welcome to the factory." His voice was high and fluty. "Will you come forward one at a time, please?" he called out. "And bring your parents. Then show me your golden ticket and give me your name. Who's first?" The big fat boy stepped up. "I'm Augustus," he said. "Augustus!" cried Wonka, seizing his hand and pumping it up and down with a terrific force. "My dear boy, how good to see you. Delighted, charmed, overjoyed to have you with us. And these are your parents. How nice. Come in, that's right, step through the gates." Mr. Wonka was clearly excited as everyone else. "My name," said the next child forward, "is Veruca." "My dear Veruca, how do you do? What a pleasure this is. You do have an interesting name, don't you? I always thought that Veruca was sort of a wart that you got on the sole of your foot, but I must be wrong, mustn't I? How pretty you look in that lovely mink coat. I'm so glad you could come. Dear me, this is going to be such an exciting day. I do hope you enjoy it." "I'm sure you will. I know you will. Your father, how are you, Mr. Salt? And Mrs. Salt, overjoyed to see you." "Yes, the ticket is quite in order. Please go in." The next 2 children, Violet and Mike, came forward to give their tickets. Then to have their arms practically pumped off the shoulders by the energetic Mr. Wonka. And at last a nervous voice whispered, "Charlie Bucket." "Charlie!" cried Mr. Wonka. Well, so there you are. You're the one who found your ticket only yesterday, aren't you?" Yes, I read all about it in the morning papers. Just in time, my dear boy. I'm so glad, so happy for you. And this, your grandfather? Delighted to meet you, sir. Overjoyed, enraptured, enchanted. All right. Excellent. Is everybody in now? 5 children? Yes. Good. Now will you please follow me? Our tour is about to begin. But do keep together. Please don't wander off by yourselves. I shouldn't like to lose any of you at this stage of the proceedings. Oh dear me, no." Charlie glanced back over his shoulder and saw the great iron gates slowly closing behind him. The crowds on the outside were still pushing and shouting. Charlie took one last look at them, and then the gates closed with a clang. All sight of the outside world disappeared. "Here we are," cried Mr. Wonka, trotting along in the front of the group. "This is the big red door, please. That's right. It's nice and warm inside. I have to keep it warm inside for the factory because of the workers. The workers are used to an extremely hot climate. They can't stand the cold. They would perish if they went outside in this weather. They'd freeze to death." "Who are these workers?" asked Augustus. "All in good time, my dear boy," said Mr. Wonka. "Be patient. You shall see everything as we go along. Are all of you inside? Good. Would you mind closing the door? Thank you." Charlie Bucket found himself standing in a long corridor that stretched way in front of him as far as he could see. The corridor was so wide that a car could easily have driven along it. The walls were pale pink, with lighting. The lighting was soft and pleasant. How lovely and warm, whispered Charlie. I know, and what a marvelous smell, whispered Grandpa Joe, taking a long, deep sniff. All the most wonderful smells in the world seem to be mixed up in the air around here. The smell of roasting coffee and burnt sugar and melting chocolate and mint and violets and crushed hazelnuts and apple blossom and caramel and lemon peel. And far away in the distance from the heart of the factory came a muffled roar of energy, as though some monstrous gigantic machine were spinning its wheel at breakneck speed. Now this, my dear children, said Mr. Wonka, this is the main corridor. Will you please hang your coats and hats on those pegs over there, and then follow me? That's the way. Good. Everybody ready? Come on, then. Here we go. He trotted off rapidly down the corridor, with tails of his plum-coloured velvet coat flapping behind him, and the visitors all hurried around after him. It was quite a large party of people. When you came to think of it, there were 9 grown-ups and 5 children. 14 in all. You can imagine that there was a good deal of pushing and shoving as they hustled and bustled down the passage, trying to keep up with the swift little finger in front of them. Come on, cried Mr. Wonka, get to move on, please. We'll never get around today if you dawdle like this. So he turned right off the main corridor into a slightly narrower passage. Then he turned left, then left again, then right, then left, then right, then right, then left. The place was a gigantic rabbit warren, the passages leading this way and that in every direction. Don't let go of my hand, Charlie, whispered Grandpa Joe. Notice how all the passages are sloping down towards, called Mr. Wonka. Now we are going underground. All the most important rooms in the factory are deep down below the surface. Why is that? Somebody asked. There wouldn't be nearly enough space for all of them up on top. These rooms you're going to see are enormous. They are larger than football fields. No building in the world could be big enough to house them. But down here, underneath the ground, I've got all the space I want. There's no limit, so long as I hollow it out. Mr. Wonka turned right, he turned left, he turned right again. The passengers were sloping steeper and steeper downhill. Then suddenly, Mr. Wonka stopped. In front of him, there was a shiny metal door. The party crowded around. On the door, in large letters, it said, "The Chocolate Room." And that's the end of chapter 14. Come back tomorrow for chapter 15.